This is the last talk about my Lemurian experience. First, the Vortex was opened, and then that site was linked to other Lemurian centres in the world, being Borobudur, Mount Shasta, and Maui. After this, our travels took us further abroad. But this time, the three of us were to split up and go to separate locations. A British girl was to go to Borobudur, and we were all to have a male partner. Her husband was to accompany her. My regular friend was to go to Britain to the stunning stones of Kalanesh, and her male partner was to be my then British publisher. I had to go to Stonehenge and was told that my partner would be notified much later once I had permission to be there. I had to write to the National Heritage people to ask permission to be there without any other people or groups at specific time in the night. So I asked for 10 p.m. till midnight. It took 3 months for the permission to arrive in writing, with a page of do's and don'ts, one of which was no penetration of the earth. I thought, oh dear, because part of my instructions were to bury a crystal at a very specific place there, to clean up the energy because some somewhat unsavory things had been happening at the site. So I just assumed they'd make it happen somehow. Anyway, with the date established, my British publisher, I was given the name of this person, a very famous British person, and my British publisher got his phone number for me. And I phoned him from Singapore, and he just said yes, without asking any questions. Couldn't believe it. He's really famous. Anyway, he met me at a station on which we had agreed on the day that we were to go to Stonehenge. And he took me back to his home and then wanted to know all the details, of course. He then told me his extraordinary story, which I can't divulge because that's his private business. But it made me realize he's a deeply spiritual person. So I explained about burying the crystal. So he put a shovel up his jumper, and I carried this large crystal. And we arrived there on time, went and sat at the precise spot where this crystal had to go. And again, I can't divulge that. But there was a guard walking around the whole perimeter with a bright searchlight. He wasn't shining it on us, just lighting his way around. We could see him clearly because it was a full moon. It was quite beautiful to be there at that time. So we knew we couldn't start digging holes. I put my hands down behind me, obviously guided, and went, "Oh, someone's dug a hole," because the ground everywhere was rock hard. And so I just shoveled all the soil out between us. And then we blessed the crystal and planted it exactly as I'd been told. Pushed all the soil back, tamped it down. There is no way anyone would have seen anything different there from the rest of the grounds. So wonderful what the universe can do. Yes, the shovel stayed up the jumper. We three girls had our watches set on Singapore time because we were to make connections with each other in both directions. So every 10 minutes the energy would be sent from one place to another, which meant it took an hour in all. We left wide space so there'd never be any mistake. It was very interesting because, thank heavens, the Borobudur energy coming into us was completely benign at last. All that fierce energy had dissipated. And the energy from the standing stones of Kalanesh came in like light green, fluffy clouds, quite beautiful. An interesting thing for us was when we sent the energy of Stonehenge to Borobudur, we both got the vision of one of those massive stones lifting up and heading south. It was extraordinary. I mean, it was an energy, obviously, not a stone itself, but the energy of the place left in the form of one of those massive stones. So then we were finished, and my friend said he couldn't believe how quietly I worked. We would just link hands and 1, 2, 3, send at the precise time. I said, why would I make a noise? He told me about someone else who's very famous, who used to go there, writhe on the ground and wail and screech with whole lots of hangers-on with him. And he thought that was the way that things got done, because it's all he'd ever experienced there. So no wonder if we had to plant a crystal to clean up the energy. Anyway, so that was that. I stayed at his house that night, and next morning he put me on the train back to the airport, where I met my American friend, and we flew home together. Back in the office, having said, oh, I just needed a break, having 3 days at home, because no one was to know what we were doing until it was over. So then our last thing to do was to put energy pegs all around the island of Singapore. The idea was to open it to its spiritual energy, something like that. We just did as we were asked, without really understanding the true purpose. It was interesting. In some places, the energy would go in like a fine laser, gently, simply into the ground. In other places with very dense, heavy energy, it would be like driving a massive bridge pile into the earth to cleanse the area. It took us a whole day to go around the whole island doing this. We were exhausted at the end. Then a few days later, all three of us this time went to the sacred centre of Singapore, and we connected all of those points we'd planted around the perimeter, all drew them all in and grounded them into the sacred centre, so that the whole island had a spiritual light covering it. It was quite beautiful. After that, it was quite interesting to see some changes that occurred there. Spiritual teachers started arriving from other countries, healers, all sorts of people who had never been there before. And there was a woman who ran a spiritual bookshop. Somehow she knew what we'd done, though we never told anyone. And she said to me one day, "Your work is done here and it's time to leave." And so it was. The other two girls, their husbands, were suddenly transferred to the US. Well, we kept in touch for quite some time, but eventually drifted apart. And we all know we're together for what we're meant to be together for, and then each one moves on to the next phase of their life. All was well. So that's the end of my Lemurian story. And perhaps you will go to one of these places and experience this very beautiful, peaceful energy. It's quite wonderful. I really enjoyed working with Sanat Kumara and the White Brotherhood, and in fact there were many others on the team. They would give us feedback every night after work, whatever work we'd done, to tell us whether being successful or not, and luckily it always was. We didn't have to repeat anything. But our initial instructions of where to be and when always came from Jesus. So there was a big team involved, quite wonderful. So I hope that is good for you all. Enjoyed it. Continue with Sanat Kumara's processes. They're amazing. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Much love.